communications that they handle through our networks is secure, safe, and it wouldn't be used where it shouldn't be used. Third, of course, is which we all deal with as industry leaders is how do we manage the minimum amount of money that we have, limited amount of money that we have at the end of the year, beginning of the year, to provide the services to our customers without compromising on the quality of services that we have. Again, I echo what Mr. Bhargava talked about: sustainable solutions. The problem is the amount of data that is growing. The footprint is massively increasing. So how can we ensure that whatever we put out there is sustainable rather than something that would eventually be harmful to the environment? To give you a good example of customer experience, if you really look into the 2G, the mobile, the voice world versus the data world, especially in a prepaid market like ours, for even a rural consumer, it is very easy to understand that if I talk for 10 minutes, this is probably what my cost is going to be in paise or rupees. Whereas if they're using internet, or depending on what they watch, if it's an HD video, it's a regular video, it's Facebook, if it's a website, the KBs that is consumed for that period is very different. So how do they correlate the usage or the time to the amount of money that they have to pay or that they owe? So how can we make it simpler so that it's much easier for them? How can we make sure that the interactions that the customer have at the point of sale or at the call centers or wherever they go is not laden with many papers, difficult questions, rather it's a seamless experience across channels. There's so many of these things that, you talk about challenges, I think, quite a few, but you know what, that is what makes it interesting for us as well.
Thank you so much. I think your point about simplification, I think, is very important. Earlier, Akhil had also stressed on the need for simplification. And as a user, let me tell you, telecom is very, very complicated for me as a user, especially the schemes available, the options which are there, the bill which comes to me, and so on and so forth, and the numerous SMSs that I keep getting as reminders. Samir, I think you had the benefit of listening to some of the speakers before you. What is your understanding of this issue, and what are your thoughts on this?
I think let me take up from where Mr. Bhargav left regarding yesterday's match. I think it's similar to what we always think in our space whenever we're in the office, constantly trying to optimize our resources. And that's where we actually align ourselves with the sports arena, rather the cricket, in that sense. When do we bowl what? When do we optimize? And timing is here is very crucial. I mean, everybody says, as Mr. Bhargav was saying, and every commentator, that we have to bowl at the right length and at the right place. So I think I'll come back to the challenges which we are facing in terms of the telecom companies and making it more simpler. The key challenge which we are facing is how do we connect the highway and the dirt road? We are actually operating at all the levels. So the new project which the Government of India is coming up, as Mr. Bhargav was saying, is about the NOFN, which is the laying of fiber all over the country. We have fiber in the country, but I think that's not enough. So going at the block level where the market is going to be, I mean, if you see the pyramid, we have already covered almost about 70% of our national population. But going forward, how do we connect the rural folks? And this is where I was using the terminology of how do we connect the highway and the dirt road. So going to the last mile is actually the dirt road, and connecting to the fiber at the national highway will be provided by the NOFN. So last mile, Ibrahim, is one of the key objectives of any telecom operator, and that's one of the key challenges we are facing. So that's point number one. And the other point is how do we actually optimize the network? How do we actually cut costs? Because that's going to be very crucial going forward. So all the auctions we have seen, the amount of spectrum all the operators taken, and how do we optimize that? So in that sense, I think immediately we are working in, and not that we'll be working from now, but from the last couple of years, the key point of from our perspective, from Aircell's perspective, is how do we give the best optimal services at the minimum cost? So that's the second challenge we are facing. And the third is actually from the device side. How many apps which are compatible, as I think earlier in the earlier discussion, and Sanjay spoke quite well on the fact that devices was one of the key factors which actually is the bridge between the network and the consumer. And how do we optimize the device types? How do we actually use the best services and give the right apps for every consumer? So we'll call that as horses for courses. The specific apps for specific consumer. That's the next focus for me. And actually, what we are doing in that arena is we are getting a lot of tool, lot of probes, which gives you the insight in what the consumer wants. So we actually optimizing a network for that scenario. So these are the 3 or 4 big challenges we are facing. But I think as we go along, there is a solution for every one of them.
Okay, thank you. I think very important point, especially about the last mile and the affordability. I think these are going to be really big differentiators as we go forward. Ashwini, from MTS, I think primarily it's about data and services around data. Last time we met and you were talking about what new services that you would be looking at, and everybody has been talking about data. So what's your view on the kind of challenges that are there, especially from your type of telcos?
I think it's good that I'm talking last. So most of the things have already been covered. So I agree with all my co-speakers that the biggest challenge for especially the data kind of services is to come up to the mark to the customer expectation, because the customer expectation is ever changing, ever growing. Okay, so if I go with Mr. Bhargava's analogy of cricket match, so the situation with us is that our target is moving. It is Duckworth-Lewis rule is getting applied to us, because our target is being set by these OTT players. So we are not the people who are setting the target. So these are the players who are acting as Duckworth-Lewis rain-curtailed match. Okay, because today our network may be good enough for providing a good quality video. So tomorrow this video will become high definition video. Day after tomorrow it will become another step, more pixel into the video. So in a way, and I'm only talking. I handle the network in the MTS, and I mainly know about the network. So I'm only talking about the network challenges. So network challenges how to provide good connectivity to the consumer for all these kind of moving targets. Which is if you see over the last 10 years, I don't know, from this whole ecosystem around us, which is mainly controlled by OTT players and which is mainly deregulated, and we are, highly regulated industry, but, we have to be dependent on them and we have to keep following them. That to me is the biggest challenge. And, as Mr. Bhargav said, so while following them, we have to keep focus on all the 3 aspects of our network, not only the air interface, which is, obviously more to do with spectrum and, how much money we can spend on our base stations and, how much radios we can install on the field. It's also to do with the backhaul, fiber and all those things, how much fiber or how much bandwidth we can kind of, afford, and how much, bandwidth we can get, how much fiber is actually on the ground in the country, and also to our core network, which is kind of converging everything and able to provide service to the consumer. So this is how I look at it, that because of this big, moving target that we have, because in my experience of about, almost like, let's say, about 10 years since we started data, I think this whole paradigm is changing every, I don't know, every month or every 6 months or every year. So the requirements of the network are also changing accordingly. So that's something.
Very true. I think the moving target is a very, very good analogy that you are bringing up here. And I don't know if there's going to be any respite to this. You wanted to sort of,
I'll just add to what Ashwini was saying. Is actually the moving target is that it's not the rail or rain curtail play. It's actually in the same 50 overs. Now we have to score more. So it's actually a very, very difficult target being set by the ecosystem. And I think this is where I think the operators and the regulator as well as the OTT players have to co-create rather than fight with each other. I would say that we have to co-create a business model where there is joint winners rather than only one winner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a very important point because if these three stakeholders can sit together and work out how do we go forward on this, things are not going to be very simple, and this sort of logjam, if I may use the word, will continue, and this the targets will become bigger and they will be moving targets. Sanjay, you have any observations for the discussions so far?
I think everyone covered very key points. I think I can only echo with them and summarize what we see being a technology player. So I think from my standpoint, I think there are all these guys, CTOs and CIOs are really challenged. I think the business has changed 180 degrees in the last couple of years, and I think the biggest challenge is the legacy that they have, and the opportunity is how quickly they can transform it. So in my view, given all the challenges that were listed out here, I think they have to work on three fronts. The first one is, of course, starting with architecture. Since we have CTOs and CIOs on the table here, I think they need to look at what is it that they have got, right, and how can they quickly transform this, both the network and the IT architecture, into one that is cost effective, because the amount of money that you have shelled out for spectrum, of course there is, now we need to get return on investment on that, and you need to be creating a cost of production that will give your shareholders and your CEO the vehicle, so he can, even at $3, $4, $5 ARPU, he can generate EBITDA levels that the shareholders are demanding. I think, so that's one piece. How do you transform this architecture? And I tend to agree with Alpana. I think here you need to be a little bit forward-looking. The winner would be the one that takes on, because there's a lot of risk involved. It's a lot of legacy that you have to take care of. But in our way, what we're seeing around the world, the successful operators are those who have taken a dent on this. I think from a technology standpoint, you have all the technologies available. You have cloud, you have virtualization. We're also innovating now. We're trying to bring, the intelligence into the network where it moves from being in the core to the edge. Because, Alpana, you mentioned about Internet of Things. I think that's the next wave of revenues you guys will see. Question is, how do I make it interesting from my profitability standpoint? And the only way you can do that is you got to create a network architecture that is throwing a cost of production that's sustainable. It's not the same world. I mean, you used connecting people. Now it's about connecting billions of devices out there. And I think one of the challenges you guys will have is, how do you store this data? I think Sanjay Kapoor mentioned it in the morning. There will be an enormous amount of data generated. How do you handle that data? I mean, do you still believe